There's a quiet kind of panic that hits sometime in your late 30s. It doesn't show up all at once. It creeps in. You're at a wedding or a school reunion, or maybe you're just scrolling on a random Tuesday night. Someone your age just bought a second home. Someone else is celebrating a big promotion. Another friend posts a photo with the caption, "Grateful for 15 years in business." And then there's you. You close the app, you stare at the ceiling, and a question forms that you don't really want to say out loud. Shouldn't I be further by now? By 40, shouldn't certain things be done? The career figured out, the house secured, the investments growing quietly in the background, the anxiety handled. If you're anywhere near that age, or even approaching it, that thought can feel heavy, like you missed a deadline you didn't know you signed up for. But here's the part nobody really explains. The idea of what you should have accomplished by 40 isn't just financial, it's psychological, it's social, it's inherited, and most of it isn't yours. We grow up with invisible timelines. By 25, you should have direction. By 30, stability. By 35, momentum. By 40, mastery. But those timelines were built in a different economic reality. Housing was cheaper relative to income, career paths were more linear, loyalty to one company often meant predictable raises and pensions. Now, people change careers multiple times. Industries collapse, entire skill sets become outdated in 5 years, rent eats half your paycheck in some cities, and you're expected to somehow keep up with inflation, social comparison, and your own evolving identity at the same time. So when you look at 40 and feel behind, it's not always because you failed. Sometimes it's because you were playing a different game. Let's slow this down. When people say, by 40 you should have your life together, what does that actually mean? Usually it translates to a few things. Stable income, minimal debt, some retirement savings, maybe a home, maybe kids, maybe a business or a senior position. But underneath those milestones is something deeper. Security. That's really what we're chasing. Not the house itself, not the title, not the investment account. We want to feel safe, competent, not scrambling. And the uncomfortable truth is that many high-functioning, intelligent adults reach 40 without that sense of security, not because they're irresponsible, but because life is non-linear. Some people spent their 20s and 30s supporting family. Some changed careers at 34 and took a pay cut to do it. Some got divorced and had to rebuild from zero. Some avoided investing not out of laziness, but because it felt confusing and intimidating, and no one ever explained it clearly. There's a difference between being reckless and being uneducated. Most people weren't taught how money actually works. Compound interest, for example, sounds like a fancy concept, but it's simple. Money earning money, and then that money earning money. If someone invests $500 a month starting at 25 and earns an average long-term return of 7% annually, they could end up with well over $1 million by retirement. Start that same habit at 35 instead, and the final number drops dramatically, not because they're bad with money, but because time matters more than intensity. And that's where regret sneaks in. If you're 38 or 40 and you didn't start at 25, it can feel like you permanently damaged your future. But here's what most people miss. Yes, time is powerful, but behavior is more powerful than shame. Shame freezes you. It makes you avoid looking at your accounts, avoid calculating your net worth, avoid opening retirement statements, avoid conversations with your partner. You tell yourself, I'll deal with it later. Later becomes years. Catching up starts with clarity, not making more money. If you're approaching 40, here's what actually matters more than flashy milestones. Do you know your monthly expenses? Not vaguely, precisely. Do you have a buffer? Even 3 months of expenses in cash changes your nervous system. It reduces that constant background hum of fear. Are you investing consistently, even if it's not impressive? Do you have high-interest debt that's quietly draining your future? These aren't glamorous questions, but they're foundational. The problem is that by 40, people often think they need to make aggressive moves to catch up fast. They look for shortcuts, risky investments, day trading, crypto bets, business schemes promising quick scaling. Why? Because psychologically, we're trying to compress time. We want to undo a decade in 1 year. But money doesn't respond well to desperation. Let's imagine two 40-year-olds. One panics and throws $50,000 into something they barely understand because it promises 20% returns. The other calmly increases their retirement contributions, pays off high-interest debt, builds a 6-month emergency fund, and invests in low-cost index funds consistently for the next 20 years. The first person feels proactive. The second feels boring. 20 years later, the boring one usually wins. Catching up fast isn't about dramatic returns. It's about eliminating drag. High-interest debt is drag. Lifestyle inflation is drag. Cars you can't afford are drag. Subscriptions you forgot about are drag. Emotional spending after stressful weeks is drag. At 40, the real flex isn't earning more, it's keeping more, and keeping it in systems that quietly grow. But there's another layer we need to talk about: identity. By 40, many people feel behind not financially, but existentially. They thought they'd feel more confident, more settled, more certain. Instead, they feel like they're improvising adulthood. That insecurity can spill into money decisions. You upgrade your lifestyle to prove something. You overextend on a house because it signals success. You stay in a high-paying job you hate because it maintains the image of being on track. Money becomes a mask, and masks are expensive. The turning point isn't usually a spreadsheet. It's a realization. You don't need to match someone else's timeline. You need to design a life you can afford and actually enjoy. That sound shift is simple. It's not. It means asking uncomfortable questions. If no one was watching, would I still want this house, this car, this job title? If social media didn't exist, would I feel behind? Financial progress after 40 accelerates when comparison slows down, because comparison leads to overspending. Overspending delays investing. Delayed investing increases anxiety. Anxiety fuels more comparison. It's a loop. Breaking it requires something quieter: acceptance. You are where you are. No time machine, no alternate version of you who started investing at 22, just you today with whatever income, debt, and experience you currently have. And here's the part that should actually feel hopeful. At 40, you probably earn more than you did at 25. You understand yourself better. You've made mistakes that taught you expensive lessons. That maturity is an asset. When someone starts investing at 40 with clarity and discipline, they often stick with it more consistently than someone who started casually at 22. You don't need 40 years of compounding. You need 20 years of focus. Let's put simple math to that. If you're 40 and invest $1,500 a month at 7% average annual return for 20 years, you could end up with around $780,000. Increase that to $2,000 a month, and you're crossing the $1 million mark. That's not fantasy math. It's steady, reasonable assumptions, but it requires two things: margin and consistency. Margin means you're not living at the edge of your income. It means you've resisted the temptation to let every raise disappear into lifestyle upgrades. Consistency means you invest even when the market dips, even when headlines scream, even when your coworker says they're moving everything to cash. This is where psychology becomes more important than spreadsheets. The market will fluctuate, your motivation will fluctuate, your income might fluctuate. The system has to stay. Automatic contributions, automatic bill payments, a predefined percentage that goes to investing before you see it. By 40, you don't need to be perfect. You need to be systematic. And we haven't even talked about the hidden advantage of starting later with intention: urgency. A 25-year-old might skip investing for a year because retirement feels distant. At 40, retirement is no longer abstract. It's visible. That proximity can sharpen focus. But urgency must be calm, not frantic. There's a difference between saying, "I need to fix this," and "I'm a failure." One leads to action, the other leads to avoidance. If you're behind on retirement savings, start with visibility. Calculate what you have, estimate what you'll need using conservative assumptions, bridge the gap with realistic monthly contributions. If you have debt, prioritize high-interest balances first, not because it's morally superior, but because mathematically it's efficient. If your income feels stuck, invest in skills that increase earning power. Not every certification is worth it, but strategic upskilling over a decade can change your trajectory more than one risky investment ever could. And maybe most importantly, define what enough looks like for you. Because here's something people rarely admit. Some of the most stressed 40-year-olds are high earners. They have big houses, expensive cars, impressive titles, but they have no margin. Every month is spoken for. They're one job loss away from panic. Accomplishment by 40 shouldn't mean impressive, it should mean resilient. If you have no consumer debt, a growing retirement account, an emergency fund, and a lifestyle that doesn't suffocate your income, you're not behind. You're stable. And stability compounds. When you're stable, you make better decisions, you negotiate differently, you walk away from bad opportunities, you think long-term. Financial peace isn't loud. It's subtle. It's opening your banking app without fear. It's not dreading car repairs. It's knowing a layoff would be stressful but not catastrophic. That's what most people actually want by 40. Not applause, relief. So if you're asking what you should have accomplished by 40, maybe the better question is this: are you building a life that gets less stressful over time? If the answer is no, that's not a verdict, it's information. You can still shift. Trim the lifestyle that doesn't truly add value, redirect raises toward investments instead of upgrades, automate, simplify. Focus on durable habits over dramatic moves. You don't need to catch up to everyone. You need to close the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And that gap shrinks faster than you think when you stop bleeding money, start investing consistently, and stop trying to impress people who aren't paying your bills. 40 isn't a deadline. It's a checkpoint, a moment to assess, recalibrate, and move forward with intention instead of autopilot. If you feel behind, you're not alone. More people than you realize are quietly wondering the same thing. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who rebuild isn't intelligence, it's willingness. Willingness to look at the numbers, willingness to feel temporary discomfort, willingness to trade ego for security. And here's the reassuring part. You don't have to fix everything this year. You just have to make this year better than the last. Progress compounds too. Not perfectly, not in a straight line, but steadily. And steady over the next 10 or 20 years is more powerful than any frantic attempt to rewrite the past. You're not late, you're just at a moment of awareness. What you do next matters more than what you didn't do before. And that should feel calm, not urgent. Calm. Because progress, especially after 40, isn't about proving something. It's about building something that finally lets you breathe.